Well, good evening. It is Monday night in September 2025. This is God's Comic Brad Stein, and this is Brad Stein Has Issues, where Christianity, comedy, and conservatism collide in a cacophony of clarity. Tonight's special guest will be unique and perhaps a little bit controversial, because we will be talking about Israel, which seems to have a lot of news cycle traction recently. And so his name is Jason Jones. He's been with us before. He's a head of Vulnerable People Project. Goes into places that are war-torn and difficult and tries to help and defend Christians and anybody who needs it if they are being harmed. So it will be quite a discussion, and probably quite fitting, being as it is part of that kind of big narrative that we as Americans, we as Christ followers, we as Christians, we as Westerners, we as freedom lovers are trying to decipher, where is everything fit in the world stage. We have seen over and over again in the last number of years, much more alarmingly obvious, that there are forces at work in this world that want to destroy our freedoms, our autonomy, our agency. These are very nefarious people, demon-driven folks, that's for sure, that want to make sure that God's word is destroyed, his people are killed, and that anarchy becomes the norm, ruled by self-appointed elite who are demon-possessed. I mean, it is that way, right? That sounds crazy for you to think, what do you mean demon-possessed? I mean, literally? Well, I mean, I don't know. I think if you don't know God, if you've never been sanctified in the blood of Christ, then yeah, demons can run amok. And if you think it sounds odd, demons, do you believe in demons? Well, yeah, I do. If I believe in God, I got to believe in demons. If I believe in God, I got to believe in the devil. If I believe in bad, I have to believe in good. This is the way it works. You can't have a definition of something that's specific unless there's an antithesis, something that is somewhere a counter to this other idea. That's what gives it weight. That's what gives it purpose. But more importantly, I think it gives us the consideration we have to give an idea as to what is its ramifications if it is put into place, if it works, if it is the philosophy that runs a nation, a country, a people, a family, a business, a school. Ideas have consequences. And so that being said, we sit here on a date. I'm not sure why. Do you know what the date is today? It's like September 20, 21st. Maybe?
21st.
Okay. So September 21st, 2025. I again watermark this only because it's significant. There's a memorial for Charlie Kirk, the martyred and assassinated 31-year-old who was killed last week, I guess. And they're hoping to get 100,000 people to show up. I think they got closer to 300,000, that this is going out as a memorial around the world. And Pastor Rob McCoy, whose church in Thousand Oaks I've performed at with Rick Green, and who was a fan, and his family a fan of my comedy way back in the day, will be speaking for 11 minutes as one of the many speakers to give the gospel of Christ during this memorial. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal because it will never be forgotten. It's a big deal because of what it launched. It's a big deal because of the ramifications of what is going to happen, not only in the U.S., but that's going to be a significant part because he was an American. And he was in American universities trying to have discussions that went against the grain. Now, what does that mean, to go against the grain? Well, the only way that can mean anything is if there is a particular narrative that is usually the go-to in a particular setting, like universities, which is all progressive and leftism. And so anything that would push against that is against the grain. It's going the opposite direction. It's causing burrs and spurs and pain, and it's not smooth, and it's not smoothly cutting through because it's not following the path. It's not on the river, letting the river take it where it wills. It's going upstream. It's fighting the current. It's doing the miraculous. It's spawning in a place where it belongs, no matter what kind of fight and difficulties come against it. And in the great salmon return to their spawning grounds, they die getting back there, but it was worth it because their lineage continues. Well, there's no question that Turning Point will continue and probably blow up. I mean, it'll be much bigger, much larger, many more regular citizens and Americans who learned from Charlie Kirk or were inspired by Charlie Kirk or weren't, but still have conservative or Christian values, will want to speak freely and show that not only will there not be an assassin's veto when it comes to freedom on campuses, but in fact, we will do what is necessary that is legal and constitutional to fight to eliminate once and for all the Marxist control of our nation, which is destroying us and creating advocates for violence, death, murder, all by clapping each other on the back how good and on the right side of history and how virtuous they are. Folks, if you have been able to train yourself that you are virtuous after you've murdered someone, if you are able to dance in the streets over the death and murder of someone, and proclaim it with your name attached and your face attached and put it out there willingly because you wanted people to see this is what should happen to people who speak against my point of view. You are a totalitarian, but this time it's not a word used just to shut you up like the left uses against the right by calling them Nazis. It's true. Totalitarianism means to control everything in the culture and demand that it live and is defined by your point of view. So this is just reality now. We're butting up against not the leftist view of reality, which is whenever you deem it to be true becomes truth. But in fact, we are using words like they used to be used, where they were defined as to what they actually meant and how they were utilized as tools in a conversation to try to get to truth so we could get and land somewhere that can help us grow as humans, to be more moral, more virtuous. And truth is supposed to give us that purpose, that landing place. Lies don't. Lies shift because their entire purpose is not for reality or truth, but in fact the opposite, to have absolute control of reality, reposition it to make it fit your narrative so you can have power. It's always about commanding power. The truth is very frightening. It is probably the single most frightening, dangerous idea that you can give to the leftist truth, because truth exposes everything. Truth exposes the poisons and tries to be an antidote. Truth exposes darkness and tries to bring light and cast away the shadows so we can see clearly what is really at stake. You know, if you have been watching, Brad Stein has issues over the years. I've said this before. I'm sure I'm repeating myself, but again, there might be some new viewers or listeners. When I started, it was me as a Christian conservative comedian just talking and giving my point of view mainly about Corona and constitutional breaches and loss of freedoms and this and that. And so when I realized that people had some interest in what I had to say, my perspective was intriguing to them or sometimes inspiring to them, I realized, okay, well, then I guess that's of value. And so let me continue to do that. And we've experimented. My son Wyatt is my producer, and he's my sidekick, and him and I've had a lot of fun joking around and kind of having that kind of a podcast where there's some fun involved. And I don't ever want to lose that. You know, I love, and I'm so grateful to God that my son gets to be a partner with me in this. But I do need to, more importantly, serve the living God who's called me to be a prophetic voice to the church in America in this season. And so whether you like it or not, that's what God has done. That's the barrel he had to scrape to get me to listen to what he had called me to do and to go try and do it the best I could with his leading, knowing I'm going to stumble and fall a lot along the way because I'm a flawed, sinful wretch who's been saved by God. So what is it that I want to talk about today? The memorial for Charlie Kirk, of course, is happening, and I'm sure it will always be online for anyone who wants to revisit it. And you guys can go watch it. It was just yesterday. But I'm going to leave that to itself. Many of the close friends and associates of Charlie are friends of mine. They're very articulate, wonderful people. Many I've had on my podcast, including Eric Metaxas. Frank Turek's been on with us 2 or 3 times. He was the man literally standing next to Charlie when he was killed. So these are my people. We have the same view of Christ and Christianity is true, and how it does sort of help define reality and how we should live as a nation and as a people, as humans, really. And so I'm going to let that speak for itself. You can go find that memorial. You go search that out and seek that out the best you can, because I'm sure it will be inspiring. And hopefully we'll see a lot of salvations out of that and people inspired to go be truth tellers and unapologetic to what they believe is right and true. That's what free speech is. It's costly, but it's crucial. And so I'm going to continue that. And I allow this podcast, I think, to morph a little bit more into why I started and what people liked. And that was my point of view about things. But what makes me different? What makes me unique? Well, obviously, first of all, I'm a comedian. So that might seem frivolous to some people. What does it have to do with being a comedian? Why should that even be of any value? Are you trying to tell me that a comedian's voice should have some special weight to it? Not at all. I'm in the same category as an actor, as in who gives a crap. But that doesn't make me a non-human. It certainly doesn't mean, and I would never forbid an actor or a musician or a comedian or a juggler or a magician or anyone to have a point of view and speak it boldly out loud. That's what free speech is. But sometimes they take the position that because they're given a status in the entertainment business, somehow that gives them a credibility, a depth, an insight, a wisdom that none of us have because they play a part in a TV show or a movie thus and make millions of dollars for it. So that's what they say should be listened to. They're not going to sacrifice, that's for sure. They'll continue in private jets, they'll continue in yachts, and they'll continue eating caviar while making way more money than any of us will ever make in our lifetime. That's just for one movie, let alone the 20. But they'll certainly school us on what is good and virtuous, as long as they don't have to get their hands dirty. So yeah, don't have a lot of respect for people who leverage their status and their visibility to give some illusion that they have some insider depth, especially when it is socialist driven, which is the antithesis of what allowed them to be rich, capitalism. But it allows the government to have control when in fact God must control all things and the government is under his authority. So I'm not a socialist. I'm not a Marxist, certainly not a communist, certainly not one who would worship the state. So what I thought about why me as a comic could be of some help to you guys listening or watching, I realized that I think why God used me in this season, why he called me to this place in this time, was because I'm good at words, right? I mean, that's what comedy is. It's just words. Now, you utter certain words with certain tempos. You try to add some slightly melodic vibe to it. You might say things harsher. You might say things nobody else is saying. You might say things that are on the edge or seem to be inappropriate. But all these are not to do anything but to create a technique to make a point. Now, that point is to laugh. And sometimes I got to tell you something. There's comics out there that say some really kind of taboo things, right? They really go beyond what is considered appropriate conversation in public because they're not in public. They're comics. So they're taking a special liberty to say some things that somebody might say is insensitive or racist or bigoted or whatever. But they're doing it tongue in cheek. They're trying to find the humor in the fact that you're not supposed to say that because what they're saying isn't what they actually believe. That's why it's funny, because they're making a point that we're not supposed to act like this. But instead of being angry at each other, pointing at each other, hating each other for that, they're finding a humorous way to say, let's not be like this. So that's where comedy can be interesting. That's certainly one aspect. And I do some of that in my comedy. Certainly did it in my latest album, Laugh While It's Legal, which you can get from bradstein.com. You can download it. But the other thing that I think helps me have some value when it comes to the words is the idea of I hate this word, unpacking, so I'm not going to use it. I did, but I'm not going to. I like to say untease, unravel this idea, and that is about what I think my life, my career, my podcast, my ministry, and it is a ministry, is destined to become until God calls me home. And who knows what that looks like. I guess I could be killed too. I'm a Christ follower, unapologetic. That got Charlie killed. I'm a conservative, unapologetic. That got him killed. I speak against ideas and thoughts that I think God would disapprove of. That got him killed. But, Christians around the world have been being killed for these ideas for centuries, let alone even in the last few days in this world, Christians have been suffering. We just didn't see it much in the U.S. Well, now it's come home to roost. We see what it looks like on our shores for those who hate Christ and his revelation that he was Messiah and that he has the keys to the kingdom, how to get to the Father. He's the only one. No other religion is true. Just Jesus. He's the only one that's ever pulled that off, rose from the dead. Nobody has ever done that before. Thus, he has the authority to say, it's me. I choose to believe that. And for some people, they hate it so badly, especially because it causes them to have to rethink their behavior because they are in rebellion to God, that they don't like that feeling. They want to be able to be autonomous, systemically narcissistic. This is pure leftism. So they'll kill you because they don't want to hear anything that makes them uncomfortable. But that, I guess, is part of why I realize that there is some value, there is some skill set that I've picked up over the 30 years or more so that I've been a professional comedian. Yeah, it would have been over 30 years, right? I started in 88. Wyatt, I started in 88. How many years is that?
That would be 37.
I was hoping you would be much faster.
I had to carry the one.
Yikes. Is there a way that we can do math without ones?
I suppose you could. No, you can't, because the lowest you can do is the base one system, which is literally just ones.
I see.
So no, you cannot do it without ones, but you can do it with only ones.
Can you do it without zeros?
Can you? Maybe.
Because didn't somebody invent zero?
Yeah,
like
it was invented.
Like the Phoenician, some kind of like one group. Maybe it was like Muslim or something. I just remember there was like group or a society or a culture like Babylon, something like that. I don't know who it was. I don't know. You can look it up. But somebody invented zero, and that was a big turning point for mathematics. Do you know why?
Yeah, because the concept of recording something that isn't really there opens up a lot of branches for math. It really does, yeah.
Okay, you just said that, and I guess you're assuming we're all going to agree with you.
Are you not?
No, because what do you mean? What branches of math are open now for zeros? See, you don't know. That's what I thought. I knew if I threw him a curveball, and curveball happens because of the rotation of the seams against the air current, which causes it to drop. Okay, so that's physics, I guess. So that's math. So again, I'm still in the math category. Don't think I just jumped off willy-nilly, son. I'm still locked in to math. But what I guess I was trying to get at was, what can I do? What can I add to the milieu, to the DNA, to the zeitgeist that is clearly here and exploded spiritually the day Charlie was killed? Christians throughout the world knew something had forever shifted. And as I have said to numerous friends of mine that I texted, and when we were all kind of contemplating where we were at, the phrase that kept coming up to me was Aslan is on the move. Listen, I am very much a believer that we are in the last days. Now, of course, people said that for many years, but there's never been a time in history where the last days actually could theoretically have been put into place because some of the things that you needed to be able to do, not being able to buy and sell, let's say, without the mark of the beast, never made sense. Well, I can just go out and make my own food and barter and this and that. But the truth is, if money is simply digital, then somebody can watch what you do, how you vote. You didn't vote right. You didn't take the mark, so you can't use digital. So you have no way to make to sell and trade. So you can't eat. So it's possible. We didn't have digital currency. It wasn't even considered even something to consider. 50 years ago, let alone maybe even 30. Who knows? But we now know that we're in a situation where it is as though the Lord is wrapping it up. He's saying enough's enough. There had to be the final day. Revelation's been predicting it for a long time, but it does feel and seem like a lot of the pieces are lining up that could usher in the end of it all. And then God says, okay, we are to paradise, and this is where we all belong. Well, in the meantime, we have a job to do as believers, and that is to be the best witnesses, first for Christ, but secondly, as citizens, as humans, as people, interacting with people in the best way we know how to try to bring them to God, to the same God that created me, created them. The same God that loves me loves them, and I need to understand that. I am not loved more by any means. I'm just as wretched. The only thing I did was accept the sacrifice Christ gave, and these other folks have not. So I felt to myself the best way to take this show, I'm a comic, so I always felt like I should be funny. And I try to be now and again, and I think that's an important part. But ultimately, I think what I really need to focus on is inspiring you to be the best believers you can be, to become disciples. And part of that is to study, to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So I'm going to try to start adding that and making that a very focal point of Brad Stein Has Issues. Now, we will talk about issues that are actually happening or situations that are going on. And I hope that we can have some humor along the way. That is a flavor God has given me. But some things aren't funny, right? I'm trying to talk about some very important things. But if I can help you guys learn to be able to engage your coworker, your parents, your family, your son, your daughter, especially college kids, then that to me could be a very helpful thing in society. So I thought, let's start this day with a topic. Let's start with a way to observe one idea and see if I can, tease it apart, find some pieces to this puzzle for us to think and consider, hopefully get you thinking, and then see if it might be of help to apply it to your life. And so I decided to start this initial kind of premise, this momentum of a focus on what this podcast can be with the word hate. Now, the reason I say that is because I have said, you guys, and I've said in my shows, whoever controls the words controls the people. Now, the reason that's true is because the words are the ways we communicate. The words are the ways that we understand where you're coming from, and I know where I'm coming from. And it's how we know how to get somewhere, because we are supposed to be telling the truth. And if I say turn left, turn right, and go there, and you'll find it, I trust that that is true. And if you withhold my access to reality, then we're not even communicating, because we're using a language that's the same, but we're not defining it the same, and we're not using it with authenticity. We're withholding actual facts about the language so that people can actually make decisions that allow them to end up where we promised them they would if they followed the directions. So to use words properly is important. To break down words. One of the things I told my son when he went to school, said, I don't know what they're going to teach you there. I know it's always progressive and leftist. He went to ETSU at first, East Tennessee State. I said, but at least start with the simplest of all premises. When somebody says something and uses an adjective in some way or any other word that is trying to define a particular subject matter, always say, define your terms. What do you mean by that? If somebody ever said, God is love, you say, yes. What do you mean by love? Define love. That way, you're not just using the same word. That's not as important as the same definition. And that's where hate, the word hate has been not only misused and misdefined and redefined, but worse than that, the word hate has been used as a cudgel to censor dissent. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, first off, let's start with my basic premise. Define your terms. If you were to ask a progressive, what is hate? I'm not sure what they would say. I have a feeling they might say that, you behave in a certain way towards a certain minority group, or you are hateful towards a particular moral behavior, or a certain ethnicity, I guess. That's what Marxist teaches them, is to find tribes and create tribes and force them to be the oppressed so that everybody else gets to be the victors, that protects and helps and defends them. That makes you good, especially if you're not oppressed. If you're a right heterosexual Christian male, then that you got no points. So at least if you show how miserable you actually think you are and help these others, it gives you virtue points. It's absurd. It's a secular religious repentance and redemption. Well, it's not even redemption. They never allow you to redeem yourself if you are one of the oppressors. But what is hate? Well, I looked it up. The definition, just for the heck of it, and it couldn't be more simple. It is let's see, feeling intense and passionate dislike of someone. Feeling intense and passionate dislike for someone is hate. That doesn't sound enough to me. That doesn't sound like an aggressive enough definition of hate. It's because that's the thing about hate. It's a very powerful word. You hear hate, and it sounds like the worst possible way you could treat somebody or think about somebody would be to hate them. The antithesis of love, the antithesis of kindness, the antithesis of empathy, the antithesis of sympathy, the antithesis of kindness, the antithesis of wanting to honor and be dignified towards them. It's everything that you would expect to be as a moral, virtuous person. The opposite is how you treat that person. The absolute 100% opposite. That to me is hate. It's as bad as it can be. Thus, if you say somebody hates, you are putting a huge weight of responsibility and I guess an insult, or at least a trait of these people that is bad, evil, shouldn't be accepted in common human interaction. It should be eliminated. It's the worst. If you have this upon yourself, you are as bad of a person as it can be. So to say that you are a hater, and that's what they use now. Oh, you don't like that. You're a hater. The word isn't designed for that. The word should be designed for somebody who truly has such an intense dislike and animus towards somebody or something that it couldn't get any worse. That to me would be a better definition of hate. What do I know? I'm not a dictionary. But it gives it more power because they use that word hate on purpose. So we have words like hate speech, right? Hate crimes. And it makes it sound like it's worse speech and worse crime than just crime, than just speech. So we need to understand why that is. Why did we add this adjective hate upon speech or crimes? Why did we do that? Now, what theoretically it was to do was that it was so bad that it needs to be eliminated. It shouldn't exist in culture. We shouldn't even have access to it. So a hate crime was supposed to add added emphasis on this crime, that you did this evil thing to somebody and you should be punished for it. But if you did this evil thing because this person is black, because this person is a woman, because this person is Gay because this person is old, because this person is rich, poor, whatever. It's a hate crime. You chose to commit this crime not just because you wanted to commit a crime, but against somebody's character, their identity. That makes it worse, I guess, because what punishment is supposed to do is deter crime. So I guess what they were saying was, if I make it even worse that you killed the guy because he was A, B, and C, then it'll deter people from doing it down the road, or at least let you know what a punishment this should be. Now, I'm a Christ follower, right? So I believe in morals and absolutes. I believe that God created even capital punishment. He said, if you take a life, your life should be taken. This was established thousands of years ago. That's how much God honors the sacred existence of life. You take somebody else's, you forfeit yours. God made those rules of capital punishment, not humans, because humans were never allowed access to killing somebody. Never. It was always God's. He is the one that decides when you live and when you die. We're taking the place of God when you end somebody's life and their existence, because it's sacred and it's God's. So here's the premise. I killed you. That's bad. I killed you because you're gay. That's really bad. It isn't. It's bad if you killed somebody, period. That's what's bad. I think murder shouldn't be given extra points of evil because you did it because you don't like a particular person's skin color or sexual behavior or sexual identity. I think murder should be bad enough. It stands alone. You murder somebody, it's the worst thing you can do. I don't care what the reason was. It doesn't matter. You should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. You murdered. Everybody is made in the image of God. This is what Christianity teaches us. So if you murder someone, you've stolen, you've snuffed out a sacred entity that God himself created. That's it. You have breached the ultimate act of rebellion against the Creator. That's good enough. You should face the full consequence. I don't care what caused you to do it or why you chose to do it or what your motivation is or what you did or didn't like about me or him or her or them. It doesn't matter. Murder, you committed the ultimate crime. And I don't think there should be extra punishment, because what you're basically saying is certain people, if they're killed because of certain traits about themselves, are more valuable than the guy who was just killed because they wanted his wallet. No, I think in some ways that's even worse. When they killed this poor man who was somebody's dad or grandfather or son or father because they wanted his wallet, so they made his life that trivial. To me, that's even worse in some respects because you made it worth $10. I think we need to remember what it means that if you accept the Christian worldview as is, that we are sacred if we exist, then murder is enough. But you notice that if they add hate, it allows them to give a special status to a special group of people that somehow, even subconsciously, we begin to believe means they're more important than those of us not of that status. Do you see how that's intolerant? Because it's bigotry towards fellow humans. So that's why I don't believe in it. Do I think it's horrible that you would kill somebody they're black? You better believe it. Do I think it's horrible if you kill somebody because they're gay? You better believe it. Do I believe it's horrible that you kill somebody? I do. And that's enough. But if you don't understand how the word is inserted to manipulate your freedom to say some people's life is more valuable than others, you will accept the premise. And as a Christian, you need to know the absolute truth and be able to define that for people. This is why we don't kill. You're made in the image of God. That's it. That's where it starts and stops. Hate speech now is very important for us to observe because that is one of the motivations given to the man that killed Charlie Kirk. Okay, hate speech. What is it? Have you ever thought about that? What is hate speech? If you tried to define it, I didn't look this one up. Matter of fact, Wyatt, if you can, look up the definition of hate speech. See what it says, what's out there. I'm just going to go off on this rant without looking it up, and then see if it correlates here after you find it for me. So hate speech is problematic because the only way you know your country is truly free is in its speech. The barometer for freedom is speech, because speech is an ability for you to let other folks know the most personal thing to you. This is how I believe. This is my religion. This is my identity. This is my ethnicity. This is my history. This is my family. Whatever it is about you that really makes you uniquely you, and you want to tell people about it because you're proud of it and you're honored about it and you want it to be protected and defended. That's your speech, and you want to be able to have the freedom to speak those things, even if you disagree. I mean, we live in a country that part of the robust beauty of free speech is we can disagree. That makes it more interesting. If everybody thought and believed the exact same thing, there would be no intrigue in life. There would be no nuance, no sophistication. We're robots. We're already pre-recorded and we're all saying the same thing. What good is that? Nobody would be interested. It also would prove that there would be no such thing as truth. If everybody thought and believed and acted the same way, there couldn't be truth because we're stuck without any deviations whatsoever. So there's no antithesis to the idea because everybody agrees on it. So it becomes the truth and there's nowhere else to delineate, even though we know that there are always other nuances to things that sometimes we don't understand or don't believe. So hate speech, if you look at who most proclaims it, from what I've seen, it's from the left. It's progressives are the ones that constantly use the word hate speech. And they get to define what hate speech is. And let's just be honest. This is what free speech is. It's trying to get to truth. They define hate speech as speech that they don't approve of, like, or agree with. Now, that isn't hate speech. That's a subjective preference that you have given a elite moniker to give it some royalty. That's hate speech. So it gives it almost a sense that you can't deviate from this. No one can reject this idea. It's hate speech. Well, nobody can accept hate speech. Thus, if it's hate speech and I deem it so, it must be eliminated, retracted, or at least I shouldn't have to even hear it. But let's see if we can find out what it is. What did you find out hate speech actually means?
Hate speech is abusive or threatening speech or writing that expresses prejudice on the basis of ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or similar grounds.
Okay, say the first line.
Abusive or threatening speech or writing that expresses prejudice.
Okay. So abusive or threatening language that exerts prejudice. Okay. So here's the problem with that definition, and it is kind of proven my point. So if you said, if you're a Christian, you believe that murder is wrong because we are all made in the image of God. Humans, not animals. Animals are actually something that we can take dominion on. God actually wants us to be honorable and kind to animals, but they're ours to use for us. And so we don't consider shooting a deer and eating it murder. It's killing it because we're eating its meat. We're getting sustenance from it. But if you murder a human because they're made in the image of God, it's murder. It's a unique status. Nobody else has that. Okay. So if a human being exists and it is killed by someone else, that's murder. Well, guess what abortion is? There's no other way to describe it. It's a human inside of a human. If you kill it on purpose, you murdered it. Now, if you're listening or watching this right now and you had an abortion, you might be very, very irritated or insulted or apoplectic by me saying those words, because you would have to say, and maybe you screamed it at your radio, are you saying I'm a murderer? I'm saying if you knew you had a child in you and you killed it, that's murder. Yes, I did. That's what it means to murder, to take the life of another human. Because remember, a baby inside of you isn't your body. It's a body inside of yours. we all started that way. So, but if you're feeling the friction and the uncomfortableness with this free speech, you now understand what the problem is with this hate speech definition, because that would be considered a prejudice, right, towards people who think it's not murder to kill a human suddenly. They would believe in murder. They just don't believe it when it's their baby. Well, they would believe it's if you murdered their baby, it would be, but not if they murdered the baby inside the womb. It doesn't make any sense. It's the only way, though, as a good moral person. And I'm saying if you're offended by that, it means you have morals. You know this isn't right, and no one has a right to do that. But somebody can come to me, and they do, and say that's hate speech because it makes people who had an abortion feel violated, attacked. Okay? It's simply words expressing a reality. They're true. The words are true, representing a true state of affairs. Truth is the single most important thing we have as Christians, because Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. And the truth, you shall know it, and it will set you free. So we have to tell the truth because it's the only thing that can allow you to repent. I just had Victoria Robinson on, who had an abortion 40 years ago, and she has helped many, many people overcome this difficulty, men and women. And she'll be on the podcast here in a few weeks. But, you know, she knows it's murder. She doesn't go up to people and say, you're a murderer, but she does say it's murder. And she's lived with it for 40 years, and she really did it. God forgives her. Her story is about redemption, repentance, and freedom, and healing from it, but she doesn't mince words. Death is death, and murder is murder. It's not hate speech. It's true speech. But remember, progressivism hates truth if it makes them uncomfortable, because truth is supposed to make you uncomfortable. That's how you know you don't have it. It's supposed to bring you back to reality. If you're a Christian, it's conviction. If you're a non-Christian, it's your conscience. But I'm just making a point. If I don't want to hear that because it makes me feel guilty, or it's trying to impose on my rights to do what I choose with the baby inside of me, then I want to say that's hate speech, so that you have to shut up. I don't have to hear it. I don't have to be stung by it. I don't have to be inflicted with your point of view, and it must cease. How can you make that happen? By calling it hate speech. Hate is as bad as it gets. Nobody wants to be considered as bad as it gets. Thus, I won't say that speech. And guess what I've done? I've censored you. I've stolen your freedom and your liberties. And most importantly, I've stolen my freedom and ability for the Holy Spirit to convict me so I can make the right decision. If you don't tell people about Christ because you think it might hurt their feelings because they're of another religion or persuasion, you're literally stealing the Holy Spirit's access to their soul to let them know you need to repent or you're going to hell. That's not hate speech. It's love speech. But love hurts sometimes, especially when it's trying to draw you home. So I want you guys to understand why it's important that we just have speech that we hate, not hate speech. Because there's a lot of speech I watched of people dancing, screaming, laughing hysterically about Charlie Kirk's death. That is speech that is free, and I want them to have access to it. But I hate that speech. That's different than hate speech. It's speech I hate, but I love freedom more, and I love truth more. And the truth is, I can't be a free country if I don't allow that speech to exist. If you believe in free speech, you cannot believe in hate speech. You have to believe in speech that you hate to exist. Now, that doesn't mean that you can say any kind of speech. If somebody says, let's go kill someone, that is forbidden speech because you're inciting actual violence. But what did the left do with words? They said this: words are violence. No, hitting you with a stick is violence. Shooting you with a gun is violence. Killing you is violence. Speaking words you don't like is simply freedom, and it's maturity, and it comes with a price. You don't always like what you have to hear, but you have to hear it if you want the freedom to respond. Let me ask you this, guys. What do you think would make a better society? That we forbid the ability to insult someone, or we teach people to no longer be affected and respond angrily and evilly towards an insult. Think about this for a minute. It's an odd sort of mental gymnastics. It's a question that I think is important. What would make, and just hypothetical, what would be a better society? People that forbid certain people to insult you. Nobody wants to be insulted. Nobody likes to be insulted. And as a Christian, I don't want to insult people. I'm not allowed to. I'm not supposed to, even though they will consider some things that I speak to them as insulting and hate speech. Sometimes it's not. It's like saying you can't kill a person. It's murder. That isn't an insult. It's true. That's different than saying you're ugly, you're fat, you're terrible, whatever. That's different. But would a culture be better, more sophisticated, more amazing, actually more holy, pure, moral, mature, if we forbid insults or teach people that when they hear insults, they aren't affected? Which one would be easier to do? Forbidding insults. We just make it illegal. People will still do it, but then at least there's a price to pay and maybe less people would do it. What would be hard to do? To learn the courageous and very difficult self-discipline of being offended, being insulted, being maligned, and choosing to look at it and stop and say, but is that true? Am I really stupid? No. So then why do I care what these words are? They're inaccurate. They're lies. Am I really hate speech? No, I'm not giving hate speech. I'm giving speech that is true. Doesn't mean you shouldn't always contemplate. Can I think? Can I act differently? Should I re-examine this? Is this something I should apologize for because it was in fact insulting or mean and untrue? Yeah, use it, free speech, as an ability to change your mind or say, I'm sorry because you did it wrong. That's why free speech is also important. It gives me a chance to hear something about myself that I didn't realize was happening so I can grow myself and allow God to mold me and shape me into what I should be by hearing this retort and analyzing it and going, they're right. Please forgive me. So yes, a culture would be better if you were insulted, hurt your feelings, but you choose not to because you see God as the only one by which he gets to judge you and define you. I'm not saying this would be easy to do. And frankly, I don't think it's possible to get a culture to do it. You might get a few people to learn how to do that. Matter of fact, Christianity teaches that. Christianity teaches something so odd and so counterintuitive, and I've talked about this before, that it's either just stupid or it's miraculous. And that is, love your enemy, pray for those that despitefully use you. Why would I love my enemy? It doesn't make any sense. They're my enemy. They want me dead. I watch people dance in the streets, on phones, and send it out to the masses about the death of Charlie Kirk because of what he stood for. And these are things I stand for. So I'm basically watching, this is what this guy would do if I was killed. I'm not famous and I'll probably never reach that status of influence that he did. But these guys are basically saying, hey, if it happens to you, I'll be just as gleeful. So that's my enemy. They want me dead for real, not because of words or violence. They saw real deathly violence and they celebrated. That's being complicit, frankly. So God tells me as a Christian to love your enemy. Why? Well, because God loved us and he told us there are none righteous, no, not one. So I too am complicit in evil and darkness and sin and anarchy because I am of the lineage of Adam and Eve. I had to get saved. I had to have God do the work for me so I could become free and redeemed and able to overcome my sin. Not because I did it. My flesh is always trying to conform, but because he did the work for me and God sees me through that blood, through that lens. That's what's beautiful about Jesus. Just say, yes, you can be free forever, even though you're still going to sin, make mistakes. So loving my enemy is me kind of realizing that I too was an enemy of God. He died for me. So he's saying, now you return the favor. Secondly, pray for those that despitefully use you. I always made a joke in my show. Good news is he didn't tell us what to pray. So it's always a funny thing because we're picturing, pray that they get, locusts and boils and whatever. But God said to love your enemies, which means those that despitefully use me fit that category. And what would he want me to pray for them? That they repent, that they become saved, that they come to find him too. I don't want them to. Jonah didn't want Nineveh to repent, but God said, I love them and I saved you. Now get your butt out there and help these other people. You don't get the privilege of deciding who I'm going to bring into my kingdom. So praying for those that despitefully use me not only brings hope to them returning to their Father, but even though they're doing monstrous things, by me praying for them, it keeps me from becoming a monster too. So there is some value to me as well. Jesus did it first. This is the one thing about God that we can't overcome. Christianity is the only religion where God dimensionalized himself, became like us. So when he lived a sinless life and he was spit upon and he was treated without justice and mercy, and he had to suffer for a sin he didn't commit, we can't ever say, you don't know what it's like. He said, no, I did. Now, I'm the only one that didn't deserve everything that happened to him. And I'm the only one that could then do it so that you wouldn't get paid what you deserved. So yeah, if I say to love your enemy and pray for those who despitefully use you, shut up and get busy. When Jesus was on the cross, he said this amazing thing: forgive them, Father. Why? Because, hey, I just want to be gracious? No. Forgive them because why? Because, hey, they're just evil people? No. Well, forgive them because, one day we'll get them, we'll send them to hell. No. He said, forgive them because they know not what they do. He literally is saying they don't realize that this evil that they are doing, this dancing in the streets, this gleefulness over the death of an innocent, they believe because they've believed a lie. They don't know what they've done. They literally think they're doing good. They're self-deceived. And God would ask me to try to bring them home, because when I die, and it will be soon, I get to be with him in glory. Don't deserve it. He says, while you're here, sacrifice yourself. Your turn to be Jesus and help bring others there too. So that's my thoughts on hate and how we can consider how to rethink about how we move into culture and try to help people see things differently. Will it work? I don't know. Charlie taught us one thing. Reasoning with somebody isn't enough to keep them from killing you or even to bring them to reality. But some people did. Some people were moved by it. Heck, even his death brought some people to the shock treatment they needed to go, I've got to change my ways. But we only have two choices: try to bring them the truth and the gospel in the hopes that they repent, or try to do it with violence. As Christians, we're not given that option. So whether they will ever be moved by your words, you have to try. That's what it means to be a disciple. The man we're about to speak to right now is this, I don't know if he's CEO, president, I'm not sure, one of those big titles of the Vulnerable People Project. He's been with us before, but he's been in Gaza many times, and he's seen Christians that have been killed and harmed because of the war that's happening there. He's seen Muslims that have been killed. And so this is a fairly controversial take, because as Christians and evangelicals, we've been taught, I will bless those that bless thee and curse those that curse thee. And this promise given to Abraham, we believe, was the lineage of the Jewish people. And thus when Israel was created, we have to defend Israel. And we also know that that's where the culmination of God's return is going to happen, is back on Israel. So it does have a sacred space in the entity of God's great plan. But We always have to seek the truth, try to understand the best we can, at least get as many sides as we can, go to God, seek the Holy Spirit, certainly go to the Word of God and say, what am I supposed to do? Is Israel the same as every Jew? We certainly know that some Jews have rejected the Messiah, so they're going to hell. So is that the ones I'm supposed to defend? If an Israeli does murder someone, an innocent person, they should pay the price. We don't believe in that. There is ways that one is supposed to go about defending the innocent, and it's not killing them. It's only going after those that are trying to kill others. So it's called just war theory, and that's something that I talk about another day. But this is a very controversial subject, but it's an important subject. And as Christ followers, we need to be as educated and as insightful as we can be, so that we can allow God and the Holy Spirit to move us in the direction that will best represent Jesus. So that being said, I think you're going to find this to be quite a fascinating, interesting, and informative, and maybe it'll make you uncomfortable. I don't know, but that's good, because it's going to make you think. Go to the Militia of the Mind on bradstein.com and join us, help us with this ministry and help it grow. And so, with that being said, hey, I hope and think you will enjoy this conversation with God's Comic Brad Stein and Jason Jones. How do you do, my friend?
It's good to see you, Brad Stein.
Well, it's good to be sane, as usual. Listen, I was excited when your publicist reached out about your new book. You're always dabbling in something, my man. You must have severe ADHD, because you can't just leave well enough alone. You got to find a new project, a new adventure, something to get yourself involved in. So that's exciting. Is that something that is, I guess, your calling? Is it something that you find yourself, because it seems like it's kind of eclectic. I know a lot of it has to do with defending the those who are in jeopardy, but it does seem like you end up in a lot of different parts of the globe, a lot of different projects, a lot of different ideas. So are these things that kind of come to you, or are these things you're being made aware of that you say, man, I got to go do something about this?
Well, Brad, I think you probably have ADHD too. So
Severely.
When I talk to young kids, or when parents come to me and say, my children have ADHD, what should I do? I'm like, leave them alone. It's a superpower.
It is.
It's a superpower. We're Ferraris in a world of Hyundais.
Yes.
Now, when you're a Ferrari, you're not useful for much, but you're fun and you can go fast.
Yeah.
You don't want to
and they're always, but the problem is they're always telling us to slow down. That's the problem.
Always telling us to slow down. All a Ferrari can be is a Ferrari. I can't take you to Costco. I can't haul trash to the dump, but I can go fast.
And
that's what we do. And David Mamet, the greatest playwright of the 20th century, said that writers write for the same reason beavers gnaw on wood, to stop their teeth from itching.
Oh, nice.
And I lost my first child to violence when I was only 17 years old. And I was a young parent. And from that day till this day, my teeth itch at the thought of children suffering violence. And the only thing that stops my teeth from itching is being useful, trying to serve vulnerable families, vulnerable children, whether it's the child in the womb or the orphaned child in Gaza. Today, there are 18,000 children in Gaza without a living relative. Wow. And today, as we speak, my organization is delivering food and ices, shave ice, to 10,000 orphans in Gaza just today. We're bringing in clowns and music and murals and crayons and coloring books. And, for that minute, my teeth will stop itching. I think the other thing is, in the past year, I just finished 2 movies this month. One we shot in Iran, clandestinely in a way, and then one we shot in Spain. They're both human rights, both about human dignity. I have another movie in production, another in pre-production. So my second book in 18 months. My dad always told me I was lazy. My teachers always told me I was lazy. So I think I'm running from the fear that I'm lazy and I'm trying not to be lazy and just trying to be useful and trying to have my teeth not itch so much.
It's funny. I'm an actor too. And when you are in acting class and they teach you these techniques, because acting is just counterfeiting reality. You're just trying to give the illusion that something that people are watching, either in a play or in a film, is true. Obviously, that's what makes it interesting and fun. You're voyeuristically watching somebody's life, and you're trying to relate to it in some ways or be moved by it. But there's an interesting stage direction that I remember getting from my acting coach, and that is that if you're in a scene and you don't know what to do nothing. And that was kind of counterintuitive, I think, to being kind of a personality, ADHD guy. We feel like we're just got to fill space. That we have, if it's quiet or whatever, needs to be sound. If there's something that isn't being moved, it means we're wasting time and we need to get going. And so it was interesting, kind of what you were saying is that kind of the double-edged sword of ADHD. And I was kind of joking with you, but I'm not, because it's a real condition, and it is a superpower that also comes with challenges. We're hypersensitive to everything. Things that might be like, I always relate it when I'm flying, Jason. If somebody's bumping against the back of my seat when they're trying to get in, to me, it feels like they're taking a sledgehammer and just kicking me, and they have no idea I'm there. Average people don't sense it. Everything is hyper magnified to me. And it's a sensory overload kind of thing that you have to manage. I never had the drugs that a lot of people are given to kids nowadays. But
Here's my drug.
yeah.
Coffee
Oh,
in
nice.
the Last Dragon cup. My wife's father made the movie trailer for this movie, one of the best movies of the 80s. But it's coffee. That's my ADHD medicine.
Well, and I take that. I just had some before I talked to you, as a matter of fact. But I think what I was going for in that kind of preface is two things, Jason. One is, sometimes with ADHD, and that we're certainly not focusing on that, but we're talking about how that does in fact motivate some of the ways and reasons we do things. When we don't know what to do, we do nothing, because it kind of overloads us, and so we kind of just do nothing because we don't know what to do, so we panic and we just kind of quit on it. Other times we just go, you know, balls to the wall and says, let's roll. And that can sometimes get in front of God. At least in my case, we have this wonderful passion to go and not wait. And sometimes God, I think, has to reel us back in and say, man, God bless you, but listen, hang on, wait, not yet, not this direction, not that direction. So when you start doing the things you've done, and you're doing some very significant things, and they're important things, but they could be considered, I don't know, controversial, especially when it comes to Gaza, and we're going to talk about that. Have you ever found yourself getting in front of God and finding that the value you have in the way you in your art as your artist can also sometimes cause you to not be able to give pause and make sure that I'm hearing from God and not from my passion?
Well, Brad, too, I think we have similar lives. You're a comedian and an actor. And what people don't know about the type of life we live, we spend a lot of our life alone.
Mm.
I think there's two great. First of all, do I get in front of God all the time? My passions, I have a new book coming out next year called On Rocky Soil.
Mm.
And it's my spiritual autobiography, knowing how I was raised, and my parents had me as teenagers, and my parents had them as teenagers.
Mm.
And they all for generations did the best they could, but it was broken and chaotic. And so I have a lot of rocks in my soil, and I hope the bird doesn't come and peck away my salvation. And so, as Paul asks us to do, I work out my salvation with fear and trembling. So of course I get in the way of God all of the time. I always say I'm the worst person I know. I wish I were a better human, but I know I'm grateful that grace builds upon our nature. And I've been now a Christian for 23 years. And I don't feel it. I feel worse and worse every day sometimes. But my prayer since I became a Christian was to be kind, gentle, humble, and chaste. I say that prayer every day. because I feel I'm not kind, I'm not gentle, and I'm not humble, and I'm not chaste. So these are the things when I first believed in God, I struggled with. And I feel that today I struggle with, but people will tell me all the time I'm kind and I'm gentle. And I never heard that before, you know, so maybe grace is building upon my nature. But when it comes to my work, especially, you know, when I founded my organization in 2002, the Vulnerable People Project, it came from my work as a young anti-abortion activist. My high school girlfriend had a forced abortion while I was in basic training. And that was sort of the inciting incident to my calling. And then as a young infantryman, I got this idea, even though I was an atheist, that I wanted to end abortion. And I wanted to serve families in war zones or families facing genocide, democide, or persecution. This was 10 years before I became a Christian. But I've always been, because it kind of came out of my military training, very disciplined. And I try to reduce the signal to noise ratio down to as close to all signal as possible. I'm very disciplined in my planning and my structure, and having milestones to achieve big goals that I pursue thoughtfully without trying to be distracted. And so the loneliness or the aloneness, because I don't ever feel lonely. I felt lonely as a child a lot. But as an adult, when I left home for the Army at 17, as a young soldier, I think that first year I really grappled with loneliness too. But I've never felt lonely since I was a boy, a teenager. I do feel I'm alone a lot. And I have experienced, I've been with the Peshmerga as they liberated Iraq from ISIS. I was in Sudan during the genocide. We've worked in Gaza and the West Bank with the persecuted Christians and the suffering Christians there. And so I get to be around, I get to experience I lost 2 employees in Gaza last week when our warehouse was bombed, destroying 5,000 canisters of baby formula and several tons of food. And I lost an employee in July. He was guarding Catholic seminarians, and he was shot by Boko Haram. He had 3 children, young Nigerian man who was guarding the seminary for us. So I get to experience the problem of pain in a way that I have skin in the game, but I don't often, where I'm here and they're there and we're all on the same team and I'm kind of the captain of the team. So I'm really grateful for all of that. You know, when Afghanistan fell, I believed you had me on back then. Yesterday was the anniversary of the Abbey Gate explosion, which was really traumatic. And our work in Afghanistan still continues. We still have safe houses for Christians and others, and we still do a lot of work in Afghanistan. But that experience pushed me to the edge. But never did I wrestled with all sorts of things. Acedia. I became despondent maybe for a year or two. It was very hard. But I never lost my faith in God. And I always kept in mind that this is an empathy building exercise. And that I should, as Mel Gibson says, hug the cactus and experience this fully and help me understand other people and have empathy and help me understand man and his place in the world and our vocation as Christians. So yeah, I get in my way all the time, but it's not my work. My work is a spiritual exercise. In fact, I wrote an article today, it'll come out tomorrow in my Substack, where I take the war in Israel and Gaza and I take every tribe that's communicating on it: Zionists, Christian humanists, Islamists, leftists, grifters. And what are their mottos? What are their slogans? What are their loyalties? What are their experiences? What are their theologies? And I did it in a way that I hope is very fair. I want to know where everyone's coming from. But I know that my place in the world as a Christian, and I write this on all my plans, whether it's a book, a movie, an article, whatever I'm working on, I write on the top of the paper, I was created to know God, to love him, and to love my neighbor. That's all I'm trying to do. And I want my witness as a Christian to communicate the truth about the human person, that every one of us made in the image and likeness of God. All of us. God loves us all. And we are blessed with grace to know him. And we want to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And That's it. That's what I'm here in the world to do. It's very simple, but hard.
You know,
But yeah,
indeed. Well,
long
you
answer
know,
to a question. I apologize for
no,
that.
no, no. Listen, this is your platform in this interview to explain what you're doing. Because here's the thing: we're part of a body. That's what we believe in. So we all have something at stake. If you know, if a tiny ingrown toenail on your little toe is festering, your whole body shuts down. I mean, everything matters. When the body's not functioning in balance, everything suffers. You can't, you don't, you might be able to work through it, through the pain, but it's not as effective and as profitable as it could be when you feel good and you're healthy and you're strong and you just suffer through it. But this is kind of important, Jason, because you know, I feel like my call in my life, when my comedy really became a ministry and everything changed, and I lost my career in the mainstream, you know, whatever I thought that was going to be, and it became a ministry. And then I do it with Christians and conservatives, and you know, I've got my people and whatever, so it's not me lamenting like I don't have a livelihood. But it wasn't what I thought. It wasn't what I wanted to do. But I told God, I'm yours. I go where you send me. Well, listen, it's not platitudes. If this is true, what we believe about Christ, it costs you everything. You take it seriously and you act that way, and that means whatever He tells you to do, it's His. You know, I learned something. I mean, it's so simple. Nothing kind of comes out of nowhere, Jason. I think God's edicts and moral expectations of us have been recorded for thousands of years, but sometimes we just catch up, you know, down the road and go, oh, that's what you meant. But something that has just been my bellwether in recent months, and it's so true, is that I was never called to be a Christian. I was called to be a disciple. Christian is easy because Jesus does all the work. He lives sinlessly. He suffers and sacrifices. He is unjustly crucified. He has to die and face hell for my sake. He has to resurrect, and he has to give me access to that sanctification that I don't deserve. He does all the work. Christian is easy, but then he says, now if you want to take this and join, count the costs because now you're going to become a disciple and it's going to cost, it's going to be the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life because it's going to cost you everything. And it has you, I mean, you're doing some amazing things. And I always let God kind of decide where these interviews go, Jason. And that again, I'm not using Christianese. I'm very serious. I try to live supernaturally, naturally. That God is actually involved in this moment to tell somebody something about these times that are necessary. So I never know exactly which angle it's going to take or what I'm going to emphasize. We're certainly going to talk about your book, but this isn't. But it correlates because everything that's happening is what your book is describing. So I'm going to jump right into a thing that I've seen some of your posts on, and it has to be dealt with. So I'm really interested in your perspective, and that's the Gaza thing, because this is a big, big deal. And it's not just a matter of whose side are you on or who's the bad guy or, you know, there's lots of those conflicts worldwide from different regions. But there's a caveat to this that I'm not sure we know how to navigate, and that is this idea of Christians expected to defend Israel. We believe that at the covenant of Abraham, you know, I'll bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. And those who are Christ followers have taken that to heart. Well, I have to defend Israel. I have to watch over this sacred space that God has given to these people by which I got my Messiah, and I'm a Gentile, I was grafted in. And now I'm seeing some pushback, and I'm trying to be the best truth teller I can be and be as committed to Christ's expectations of me as possible that are biblically sound. So you've been very vocal about defending Gaza. Now I know there's Christians in there, but there's a lot, basically Muslims are the ones that are getting wiped out, right?
Oh,
And so,
Christians too.
yeah,
Christians too. Just a couple of weeks ago, Israel bombed a church, killed. They actually a tank aimed at the crucifix on the church,
hmm,
blasted it, and in the process killed 3 Christians, wounded the pastor, and wounded about 12 others, I believe. And I deliver food, hot meals to every Christian every week in Gaza, and they're on about 900 calories a day caloric intake now for over a year. We provided them their fresh water. They have to go for days and days without fresh water. So the Christians are suffering not only in Gaza, but you have to know in the West Bank, as we saw in Taba, even Ambassador Huckabee threatened Israel with sanctions. The Israeli settlers have been brutalizing, beating, killing, and stealing the homes of the Christians in the West Bank as well. So, in fact, the hardcore Zionists are more offended by the Christian presence in the Holy Land than the Muslim presence, because like Muslims, the Zionists see us as Christians as worshiping three gods. They see the Trinity as really offensive. Even in the New Testament, you can see like the idea that God became incarnate to Jews and Muslims is very blasphemous. The idea that God's son would suffer, that God would suffer. And so in many ways, the most radical elements in Israeli society have a greater hatred. As you can see the videos on YouTube, they spit on Christians when they walk by. They won't just talk to them. They won't look them in the eye. So these types of abuses. Yeah, so it's not just the Muslims that are suffering. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the Christians are suffering gravely.
Yeah.
And I can give you a list of attacks on Christians directly by the IDF since the war started.
Well, and I wasn't diminishing that clearly. I've been praying for the persecuted church for years, and I'm very vocal and try to be aware of that, especially in in Nigeria and Uganda and Congo right now. Lots of slaughter.
Nicaragua, India.
Yeah. So lots of evil, evil, evil. So trust me, I'm going to defend my people first, to be perfectly honest about it. But so I want to get your take on this because I'm trying to figure it out too. I wrote a book years ago called Being a Christian Without Being an Idiot. And the whole premise of the book was that I grew up thinking that you're supposed to have capital punishment, that's a biblical thing, right? And so I was very inspired by Catholics because they were at the spearhead of the pro-life movement in the 60s, probably before that. But it was very important to them, and suddenly the Protestants jumped on board, and it's because I've done millions of fundraisers for them and so forth and so on. But what was interesting to me was the same Catholics I was intrigued by because of their staunch pro-life stance. Sometimes they were anti-capital punishment. So I said, well, wait a minute. If I assume that pro-life is Christ-like, is Christian, what am I missing over here? Is it biblical or is it just my traditions? And so in delving into that, I wrote a book about how sometimes we make traditions biblically accurate representations of Christianity when in fact maybe they're not. Maybe they're a denominational tradition, maybe they're my Western tradition, whatever it can be. That was the whole premise. But okay, so that being said, I want you to take control of this because I really need to know what you're up to, and I'm sure the people listening.
And I like to compare it to the death penalty. You know, I'm a Catholic, so the death penalty is not like incommensurate to abortion, right? Abortion is wrong everywhere. The intentional destruction of an innocent human person is wrong everywhere, all the time. Yeah. The intentional destruction of an innocent human person is wrong anywhere, everywhere, all of the time. Knowing that an action may lead to the death of innocent life is not wrong everywhere, all the time. And killing criminals is not wrong everywhere, all of the time. And those are what you'd call prudential. So as a Catholic, I support a moratorium on capital punishment. A moratorium, you can't abolish capital punishment. It is the right of the state to exact retribution on criminals for the safety of the community, but not only for the safety of the community, as scripture tells us, but for the well-being of the criminal, to let them know the seriousness of their offense so they can repent. So, well, I would want to see an abolition of the capital punishment in the United States. Can I use a really inappropriate joke that I used to use in the 90s when I would speak against the death penalty in the United States?
Yeah, man.
I said, I used to be for the death penalty when it was used in a rational way. Up until a few years ago, only blacks and retards got capital punishment. Every once in a while, white people get it now. And that was my way of pointing out that it has not been applied consistently in the United States. and that disabled people and minorities suffered. And you can just look at the statistics. And so we have the ability as a modern nation state that's a $26 trillion economy to exact retribution and protect the community in a way that also protects the innocent from being punished with this horrible crime. But if I was a Bedouin tribe and I have a child rapist in my community, if I exile them, they're going to go rape someone else's child. We don't have maximum security prisons. They were nomadic people. So clearly they have to use capital punishment. And then maybe I'm getting too much into the weeds. But I think
not really, but and I wasn't even trying to make a lobby either way on that. It was more about me realizing that sometimes, Jason, believers will accept perspectives and philosophies of how they're going to vote, do, behave, and think in very important issues without taking them very seriously.
That makes me very upset. People will come to me. I've been working in the Middle East now for 30 years. All I do when I wake up is I have fact sheets, study sheets, language practicing, calls with all people with skin in the game. I have friends that are settlers and friends that are Christians and Muslims in the West Bank. And this is something I take with ultimate seriousness, to the point I've been back and forth to the region twice this year, and I'll be going back twice in the next 6 weeks. And there are people who've never really thought about it much, but they have tribal identifications. We should take tribal identifications serious. It's important to be loyal. In my article coming out on all the tribes involved in Gaza, and the argument on Gaza, I use the poem "If" as my sort of peg by Rudyard Kipling. And he says, when all men can count on you, but none too much, then you're a man. What does that mean? You can count on me, but don't count on me to be there for you when you're not being just, whoever you are. I hope. Now I'm a human. So do I get swept away by tribal identification or personal interest or community interest or tribal interest? Yes. On October 7th, and I wrote an article on this called "Help, I'm an Anti-Palestinian Bigot." The first thought that went through my mind when I saw the horrible crimes committed by that Islamist organization, Hamas, was "flatten Gaza." Those words went through. I said them to myself. And then, of course, I'm a Christian, and I looked at myself like, what's wrong with you? There's a lot of women, children, innocents, and civilians there. Yeah. But I understand this impulse, this reaction to horrible crimes.
Yeah.
I 100% get it. Now, when we look at the crimes in Gaza, there's two things. First of all, I don't know which you would like me to address first. There is Christian Zionism. Now, Christian Zionism has made this tragedy possible because the United States has written a blank check to Israel because of the power of politics and the power of Christian Zionism. Not Zionism, not Jews, but Christians.
When you say, and I want you to continue this, but I just want to make sure we're defining our terms so that everybody can follow. So to me, a Zionist, Jewish Zionist, is someone who believes that the land of Israel is given to them by God, by decree. It's theirs, and it's holy, it's sacred. It can't be rebuked because it was a holy writ given by God. So when
that's clearly not scriptural.
Okay.
And it's clearly not a part of what any Christian believed for the first 1900 years of Christianity. But that's what I mean.
So when you say Christian Zionist, would you say the way I was, with the perspective I was giving you earlier when I said, I just kind of grew up saying you're supposed to defend Israel because I'm a Christian. That's that. And that's why I brought up the capital punishment. All I was saying.
And that idea.
I don't know if I've gone deep enough is what I'm getting at. I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, let me explain to you that idea that we should support the state of Israel is state-sponsored propaganda that has spent billions of dollars in the church in the Anglosphere in the 20th century, countless billions, that does not exist in historic Christianity, neither the apostolic Christian communities of Catholicism or Orthodoxy, nor any of the mainline Protestant denominations. This was something that entered through Darby and Schofield. It's novel. It's not scriptural. In fact, Paul's letters, there's a reason why there's been a movement to diminish the influence of Paul or to undermine Paul, because, Paul's letters almost seem as if they were written as a modern day rebuke on Christian Zionism. Now, to me, Christian Zionism isn't even Christianity. It's apostasy. It's not a heresy. And what do I mean by that? I know to a lot of you, I don't mean to trigger you or upset you, but here's the deal. Jesus Christ came first for the Jews and then for us.
Yeah.
There is no other covenant. He came first for the Jews and then for us. And we were grafted in. And my organization right now has, I don't want to say this as if like, I'm not racist. Some of my best friends are black, or I'm not an anti-Semite because my organization guards Jewish communities in dangerous countries, which we do. I could do that and be an anti-Semite. I could do that for cover or whatever. But the point is I do that. My organization does do that. So I do believe in a homeland for the Jews. I wish that I didn't need a homeland for the Jews. I wish that the Jews could feel safe wherever they are. But there's two things here. The idea of the modern state of Israel being part of prophecy or fulfilling prophecy or God's will, no, that's not scriptural. It's not something Christians ever taught. Even more so, it's not a blank check to commit ethnic cleansing. And when you hear prominent Christians say things like the Palestinians are, quote, the reincarnation of the Amalekites. Well, I don't believe in reincarnation. I don't believe in reincarnation of people or peoples. And I don't believe in the age of the church, the kingdom of Jesus Christ, where he is the third temple. We are the stones of the temple. The temple was to prefigure Christ, that he would be the sacrifice for all of humanity, that Abraham would bless the world through his descendant, Jesus Christ. And then we would become a family through the body of Christ, the church. The apostles were sent out into the world. They weren't told to rebuild the temple. They could have done that. In fact, in the 3rd century, I'm getting into the weeds again, but there was an apostate Roman emperor who wanted to disprove Christianity by rebuilding the third temple, Julian the Apostate. You can research this. It's unbelievable. Historians at the time documented this. What happened when Julian the Apostate tried to rebuild the temple? It was destroyed miraculously through an explosion under the temple of fire and gas and lightning striking it. And yes. So no, Jesus Christ is enough. Jesus Christ is the fulfillment. And the descendants, the biological Semitic descendants of the Jews at the time of Jesus are Palestinians. This is a fact. The Christian Palestinians are they're most genetically connected to the apostles because they're the descendants of the apostles' families. And they are the oldest Christian community in the world. The only people that are more genetically connected to the people at the time of Jesus that were there are the Samaritans, who are still there. People don't know how diverse the Middle East is, not only through religion, but through the Jewish community is so diverse and beautiful. And one of the great tragedies, there were the Jewish communities of Iraq and Syria and North Africa, Morocco and Ethiopia and Yemen. There are still like 7,000 Jews in Iran. People don't know. So there's that. But my Zionist friends tell me I'm a Zionist because I believe there should be a homeland for the Jews. And I support a 2-state solution because I think a 1-state solution would be not good for the Jewish community. Sadly, a 1-state solution sounds great, but I think what we would probably, unfortunately, sadly need is we would need an ethno-nationalist state. And as an American, the idea of an ethno-nationalist state isn't attractive, right? Now I'm separating it from religion. I'm just talking about in the post-Ottoman Empire, all the borders, and this is one thing I say to my friends that are hardcore anti-Israel, half of the Jews in Israel are from the Middle East, okay? They're not from Europe. There's that. Number one. Number two, that all of the countries in the Middle East borders were designed by the West in the service of the West when the Ottoman Empire fell. So to say that the borders of Israel are fake, well, then Saudi Arabia's borders are fake. Kuwait's borders are fake. Iraq's borders are fake. Syria's borders are fake. Now, whatever that means, borders move and change throughout history everywhere in the world. But as a conservative who's a Christian, I want the political community to serve everyone who lives in a community. And I want everyone to have equal rights and full protection. I want Palestinians to have equal rights and full protection. Jews, the Druze, the Yazidis, like anyone living anywhere, I want to be free from fear, from violence, from coercion. This is just a normal thing.
Well, you know what, though? And obviously this is so important because it's just so pressing is happening as we speak. And who knows what the end is for this. But I guess what I'm using your perspective, which is certainly unique and should hold a lot of weight because you kind of been boots on the ground, like I said, and you've done this a long time and you're a true believer. So it's not like you have an axe to grind. You certainly aren't anti-Semitic, which is what's thrown out the moment people disagree with something Israel does.
And my friend who hates me now, Sebastian Gorka, said anyone who criticizes Israel is anti-Semitic. You know, in my book, Dispatches from the Great Campaign, let's make Sophia Press happy, everyone. Let's sell the book. So I want to talk about this. But in my book, the first essay in the book, it's a collection of my essays over my life. It was from 1999. I was getting my master's in military science and operational studies. I was the only civilian in the program. And I published in the school paper, which is in the book, an article calling for the United States to leave NATO. And I said, the reason that we need to leave NATO is it's going to push us towards a European war because we're breaking every promise and we are encroaching to the east, breaking every promise. So this being the case, I think it's in our best interest. They literally tried to push me out of my graduate program. So that wasn't pleasant. You know, as a young anti-abortion activist in university in the early 90s, I was constantly being criticized. And actually, I was thinking a lot about this. And I would hurt friends. You know, when you're a college student and you're condemning abortion, people are feeling like you're attacking them personally, people you love and care about, because you're bringing up something that they were intimately involved in. By the way, it's the same thing with Gaza. You know, we have a mutual friend. I won't say his name. You can probably guess who he is. He's a prominent guy in the entertainment industry. He's also a settler in Bethlehem. I absolutely love this guy. This guy has been so good to me. He tells people that I'm the pioneer that he followed for his great company's success. You probably know what I'm talking about, Matt. I love the guy. He probably hates me now. Sebastian Gorka hates me now. You know, that's not nice. But guess what? I was almost kicked out of grad school. I broke my friends' hearts when I told the truth about abortion. Like, that just prepared me. I'm not saying I'm always right, but you can know I'm sincere and I've been thoughtful. But the hard part is hurting people you love. I have a friend who I rescued the last Jew from Afghanistan when Afghanistan fell. One of the oldest, most prominent Jewish organizations in the world, Zionist organization, asked me to rescue this guy. Of course. I love this guy. He hasn't unfriended me from social media. I commend him for that, you know, and he actually sends me niceties from time to time. He is one of the most beautiful humans I've ever met, and I adore him. Does he feel betrayed by me? 100. I'm sure he does, like, obviously. But what I would say is there are a letter just came out, former heads of the IDF, former Mossad the head of the Mossad, I think 900 former IDF field grade officers, a former Israeli prime minister, signed a document to Trump saying, bring this war to a close. It's a crime. So when we say we support Israel, I think I support Israel more than Ambassador Huckabee, because Ambassador Huckabee is a rubber stamp to these ridiculous policies. Well, to me, it's undermining not only the interests of the state of Israel, but it's undermining the interests of Jews around the world, which is sad. I think it is sad that I wrote an article called Semites and Collective Punishment. The only people in the world we think collective punishment is acceptable for seems to be Palestinians and Jews. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. We're collectively punishing the Palestinians in Gaza, and Jews around the world are seeing an uptick in violence and hatred towards them. We're not punching Russians in the face, right? I'm not seeing that. So
So,
what is
well,
it about the Semitic people that we accept collective punishment? And maybe it comes to the mystery of Christ, that
maybe.
Christ did bear our sufferings. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Well, I did a, I don't know if you knew this. I did a documentary defending Israel years ago
I
with,
didn't know that.
Yeah, with Lori Cardoza Moore and Stan Moore. She's got a ministry proclaiming justice to nations. So she's a Christian that defends Israel, tries to protect it. And really, what it was about was the BDS movement, where they were trying to basically use the same tactics they used in South Africa to put an end to Israel's influence by boycott, divest, and sanction. And so part of what the experience was going to Israel, talking to Israeli businessmen and folks, people that on the ground, Palestinians, and kind of finding out what would the world be like if Israel didn't exist? Because it is pretty amazing. I mean, it's really, in some odd way, it's hard to not believe in God if you just look at the history of Jews, what they've endured throughout centuries as the most historically persecuted people group, I think, on earth, is pretty amazing. And yet they constantly walked away from that God. You know, you talked about earlier about Christ is the end all be all of what our uh, our perspective, our philosophies, our point of view comes from is him. Well, he was Jew, and the first church was, I mean, his disciples were Jews. So it's we could say, well, yeah, the Jews rejected Christ, so that's why. Well, wait a minute, but the first Christians were Jews. So some Jews said, I see it, I see Messiah here, and so I guess what I really want to see if we can, and it's obviously such a difficult political piece of information to try to dissect. But if we can, and again, we are going to talk about your book, Jason, but maybe this is more, or at least equally important, is Christians
All
are
that's important is you buy my book, folks, and we'll
right.
talk about this. But no, I'm kidding. I'm
Dispatches from the
kidding.
Great Campaign.
And by the way,
Listen,
in this book, there are two on this. You know, it's everything from my time in Ukraine,
yeah,
Gaza, Sudan, the West Bank, to Hollywood movie sets. I talk about my friend Andrew Breitbart in there, my friend Steve Bannon. And I talk about Andrew's Jewishness. I talk about my mentor when I was an atheist who brought me to the Lord, Mark Moses, who played a big part in it, who was a Jewish state rep. I was his chief of staff. He was Jewish, would never call himself a Christian, would never go to church, would never go to temple, but he was like, Jesus is the Messiah.
wow.
So I talk about Representative Mark Moses in there, who is the greatest man I ever knew, Marine, wonderful man. And so it's all in there. But I think this is important because this is the crux of the book. It's the great campaign.
Yeah.
What is the great campaign? It is to leave our children a civilization of love. It is to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And, you know, I'm not a paid spokesman for a tribe, nor are you. We're Christian brothers. And so I appreciate you coming from a different perspective and wanting to understand where I'm coming from. And
Yeah.
I don't think we should assume bad motives of everyone.
No,
And
and
by the way,
I don't
even
at
when
all.
people are prejudiced, I teach this to my kids who are mixed race.
Yeah.
They're allowed to be bigots.
But guess what, Jason? Here's what makes this so important. One of the missing ingredients for what at least allegedly made America great, was the infusion of different ethnicities and histories into one idea, one creed. We find these truths to be self-evident: all men are created equal. So we welcomed immigrants because we needed them. They had much more wisdom, much more years and hundreds and thousands of years of history that they could bring to us. But then we said, let's see if we can now become a republic. Let's see if we can be self-governed. It's never happened before. Let's see if we can pull this thing off. So obviously, I'm a patriot, as are you. But I think that what is important is if we stop the ability to disagree agreeably and to hear the other, most importantly, dissenting view, we can't grow. We can't teach. We're unteachable, and nothing is going to change. People say, "Oh, I believe in free speech." Well, there's an easy way to know if you believe in free speech. Do you and will you support speech you hate? Because if you don't believe in free speech. The only way free speech has any value, any weight, any salve to help a culture is allowing speech you don't want to hear to exist, or we can't be free enough to examine things. So I want to know if we can, and again, your book will be put up here. I already know that you have to sell it, but the truth is, I think what makes your book more important is that it at least is helping us examine and educate ourselves in things we may not know about so we can make informed decisions. So help me, Jason. As a Christian, uh, I was taught blanket, you defend Israel. So what is it that you're saying so we understand? Are you saying that the state of Israel from that was created in 1947 is not in fact the Israel that's referenced in I just want to make sure we all
Yeah,
understand where you're
100%
coming.
it's not. And not clearly it's not.
Okay.
Um and regardless, I think we could even put that aside, because what I really want to do is I don't want to necessarily persuade you or your audience to abandon your traditions of Darby and Schofield, which my first Bible was a Schofield reference Bible. I was so excited to buy it. I was a dispensationalist. I came into I became a Christian through a dispensationalist pastor and through Calvary Chapel, and I know the theology, and I was so excited as a poor college or graduate student when I went to the local Christian bookstore and bought this beautiful leather Schofield reference Bible. I was more excited that it was Schofield than it was the Bible. In a way, that's how my church was, to be honest. And although I didn't read the notes, so there's that. But I know the theology. But let's put that aside. I do think I have an interest, not as a Christian, actually, because of the way the United States and Britain and France have meddled with the Middle East. And I am an American, and like you, we are disproportionately influential in our communities. But all Americans have a disproportionate influence in the world, because our country, everyone on earth, unfortunately, is our neighbor. So we have to love them all, because we touch everyone and everything, right? Through social media, through the power of our country, And I do believe in a homeland for the Jews. And I do believe in a homeland for the Palestinians, right? Like, I
Okay,
believe
but let's not just use phrases. So when you say you believe in a homeland, and by the way, I want you to understand something, Jason. We're friends. I so respect you as a true believer, and I so respect you as a brother, and I so respect you as a truth teller, seeking the truth, irrespective of how people perceive you, which is what is more honorable to me, because that's a truth teller. I let the chips fall where they may. This is what is true. I have to stand for this. So you don't have to apologize for me. I'm not even pushing back. I'm trying to get a perspective perhaps that I have filtered out of myself because I've just accepted by rote. You do this, you accept Israel, be the end. I'm not saying where I'm going to land. I just need some information perhaps that I've missed. So if you believe in a land for Israel, what does that look like? Is it the traditional historic Israel that David walked and Solomon walked? If it's not, where the heck is it supposed to be?
It's obvious. I believe in this, and I want to get to the more important point, which is how the state of Israel is conducting a brutal genocide that is undermining the interests of not only Jews but the entire region.
Okay.
But I believe that I would not have supported in 1948 creating the state of Israel. It's absurd. I wouldn't have supported any of the Sykes-Picot Agreement's ideas or the Queen's Commission of 1909 to use Jews from Europe to destabilize the Middle East, to make it easier for the Great Britain to control, nor the British or French plans through the Sykes-Picot Agreement to carve up the Middle East so that they could foment religious and ethnic and interreligious and interethnic rivalries to make the region easier to control. I think that it's in the best interest of superpowers, the sole superpower, to advocate a rules-based, just world order and not have a vampire order based on violence and exploitation as a Christian man. And if I look at the borders of Israel and everything from Sykes-Picot after the World War I to Timber Sycamore, which the great Tulsi Gabbard revealed, that we were funding Hamas, Hezbollah, the Taliban. We were funding ISIS, Al Qaeda, and in Africa, Boko Haram. This is a direct line of connection to everything we have seen in that region since the end of World War I, to foment violence and division to make the region easy to exploit. Now, that sounds like the language of the left, but it's just the reality. And I want a unipolar world order. I'm not one of these conservatives that wants a multipolar world where Russia and China and India are our equals. India is an ethno-nationalist state. The Hindu nationalists, the Hinduva, are slaughtering Christians today in India. The CCP is godless. Russia is brutal and dark. If you read the writings of Alexander Dugin, Putin's brain, he openly talks about, he was kicked out of a party in the 90s for being a Satanist in Russia. He talks about the dark logos and this and this and that. No, I want a unipolar world with the United States at the top, but I want a world order that's rules-based and seeks to partner with governments and states that are ordered for the protection of the people and the interests of the people who live there. And because I'm a conservative and a capitalist and believe in freedom, I believe that my interests are advanced not through exploitation or advantage, but through fairness. All boats will rise. I thought that's what we all believed. And look, the state of Israel, first of all, even if I was a Christian Zionist, and especially if I was a Christian Zionist, I would be so upset with the state of Israel for its abortion, its homosexuality, its slaughtering and discrimination of Christians, its indiscriminate targeting of journalists and doctors and hospitals. More journalists have been killed in the war in Gaza than all wars since World War I until today. More aid workers have been killed. 2 of them worked for me. So if I believe that this was God's anointed state, how much more would this offend me? How much more? And I say this, and I don't even like saying this because I don't want to treat the Palestinians as second-class citizens. But I do have a great concern for the Jewish interest and the Jewish security going forward. Because when this war ends, all of you that are confused right now or allowing yourself to be gaslit by the propaganda that Israel isn't blocking aid, they are. I can promise you they're blocking my aid. They're not targeting workers. I can promise you they blew up my warehouse. You can believe this now, but the war is going to end and Western journalists will be allowed in, and the truth is coming out more and more every day, even amongst conservatives. That swing is dramatic, right? And I believe that, and I've even prepared my staff, we really have to begin creating programs to combat the rise of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism. And why do I say I don't even want to bring it up? Because sometimes I hear people talk about the war in Gaza as if the only reason it's bad is because this is going to have a backlash on Jews and Israelis. No, it's bad first and foremost because Palestinians are made in the image and likeness of God. They're human beings. And I can promise you, as someone who's been there, who goes there, who knows and loves these people, you will love them. You would love the West Bank. You will feel more at home in the West Bank than in Israel. I do. You will love these people. They're humans. Their kids ride bikes and jump rope and sing songs and color and run and hug their dad when he comes home from work. And the best French fries I've ever had in my life are in the West Bank. They have great potatoes. Yeah, they're human beings. They're my brother and sisters, as are the Jews. I had a great experience, Brad. I was in the West Bank. A friend of mine, Alice Cassia, she is a Palestinian Christian woman. Israel's burned down her house. Settlers have burned down her home. They've beaten her and her family. They've abused her. She's become quite famous because she stands up to them. And but she goes, she is so wonderful. She said, Jason, I support a 3-state solution. I said, what's a 3-state solution? I never heard of that. She said, one for Zionist lunatics, one for Islamist lunatics, and one for humans who can live together and be happy. I said, that's quite beautiful. Well, one night she said, Jason, you have to go with me to Haifa. So from Bethlehem to Haifa, that is a long drive, and I'm 53 years old. So I'm going with this young woman. We're going all the way to Haifa. She takes me to a party at this really cool place. They had vinyl records and a DJ, and there are all these 20-somethings singing and drinking and dancing. I sit down in a beanbag chair, and I FaceTime my wife. I go, what is this, your husband's life? I'm in Haifa, and I go, babe, who am I with? My Palestinian Christian friend brought me to meet her friends who are IDF soldiers who were fighting in Gaza. I was with Jews, Druze, Christians, and Muslims, all 20-somethings, singing, laughing, dancing. And there I am in a beach chair, this big pasty white grandfather. What am I doing there? And I'm just like, this is beautiful. I want these Jewish boys that are serving in the IDF not to be addled with PTSD and guilt and shame. They're killing themselves at an unprecedented rate because they don't fall for the lies of the propaganda. You may have just seen the IDF spokesperson trying to deny the footage is fake that they were showing on Fox News. It went viral. He began to cry live on the air because he is a human being. And he was telling lies, but his heart broke and his tears told the truth. These IDF soldiers know the truth. One just set himself on fire. He said, because he couldn't get the smell of burning flesh out of his nose. So he wanted to that's how he killed himself. Someone who's been in war zones, that smell is the worst anyway. So I'm looking at these Jewish boys and girls, I have kids in their 30s. You're in your 20, you're 26, 27. Unfortunately, forgive me, you're a kid. I'm watching these kids, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Druze, laughing, drinking, high-fiving. 3 a.m. Then we had to drive all the way back to the West Bank. That was horrible for an old man. Well, but I'm so grateful. As a Christian man, I want to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yeah. I want to be kind, gentle, and loving. I will not allow an ethno-nationalist modern ideology to pervert the gospel of Jesus Christ into an instrument of state power. And you need to know that the church, through people like Hagee and Khan, has been used through a Hasbara Israeli influence campaigns. I've been in those meetings back in the day when I was a consultant, and I can tell you this is true. And so, as a Christian man who is a priest, prophet, and king, baptized, I will not allow myself to be used by a foreign government, let alone my own government's campaigns to use the gospel of Jesus Christ to exert state power, let alone genocide.
Well, amen and amen. And certainly you don't have to convince me of what you just said, because it's Christ first. Listen, I made a mistake when I first started crossing over as a comic into conservative guy and Christian guy, kind of launched that whole genre alone. Nobody else, 25 years or more were being conservatives and patriots and whatever as a comic. Come on. So I understand that. And I was very patriotic. I loved my country. I hated people that lived off the back of the death and blood and sweat and tears of those who created this freedom, and then put it down and use the freedoms to diminish the very country that's given them way more than they deserve. So that's why I stood for this thing. And then I found myself, Jason, at times going, you know what, you've kind of equated your patriotism, your nationalism, nothing wrong with loving your nation, with your faith. And I realized, wait a minute, I'm off. It's Jesus first. It's God first. And then the sphere of influence he's given me, the United States, certainly I'm responsible for it. But it's all based on how God sees the world and what he demands and expects of me. I don't think anybody, Jason, any believer, would in any way try to defend innocent people being killed or shot or wounded or starved or whatever. So I don't think that's some sort of argument you need to defend. I think what the Christians are grappling with, like me, who grew up in that traditional mode that you defend Israel, is, well, then what does this look like? Because listen, David still sinned, right? I can believe in a Christian man who sins. I don't suddenly say it's okay because I like his teaching. No, you sin, man. So I'm not saying that I can't discern when Israel is doing something immoral, illegal. I also know Hamas puts bombs and crap with children and they do that. That I also discovered. So these guys are evil people too, but that's not the fault of the innocents who are stuck with these guys. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, all right, well then help the folks listening or watching this, Jason, who are hearing what you're saying, and they are wrestling with what they've learned and what they believe as being true believers in defending Israel. Well, then what would it look like to defend Israel? Or what would our obligation be as Christ followers, evangelicals or whatever, Catholics, to what obligation, if any, do we have for this sacred place where it's all going to culminate in the end, in Jerusalem when he returns and we all get to say we're back? Well, where is it? What's it supposed to look like then, in your opinion?
I would say first and foremost, solidarity begins with your people closest to you, your wife, your children, your neighbors, your family, your co-religionists. So how would it begin in the region is Christians are suffering across the Middle East. And they're suffering primarily because of the behavior of the United States on our war in Iraq, shattered Saddam Hussein, our war in Syria, got rid of two bad guys that protected Christians from worse people. And the Christians in Iraq and Syria have been ethnically cleansed in the 20 years we were working there, right under our nose. Okay. The oldest Christian communities in the world that were founded by St. Thomas himself. Now, the community founded by James in Gaza and the West Bank and Jerusalem. Just now, Israel's trying to steal the Christian churches in Jerusalem from the communities that have had them since they were built, going back to the first century. Christians were there. So first and foremost, but then we should just advocate for justice and righteousness and the dignity of the human person. We're the ones that should stand between our brothers who are Muslim and our brothers who are Jewish and advocate for their own interests and hope that our discipline and our kindness exemplifies the gospel of Jesus Christ and they find it attractive. That's something I hope that when my Muslim and Christian and my Muslim and Jewish friends see that how my Christian brothers and sisters selflessly serve everyone. There's people often, donors will write me and go, are you only giving money or are you only giving aid to Christians? No, unfortunately not. My Christians that we serve in Gaza, the first thing they do with what we give them is share it with their neighbors who are Muslim. I'm like, look, if I see a child in Gaza who's a double amputee, it doesn't make my heart break less when I found out he's a Muslim child, not a Christian child. Or if I see a child as an orphan, when I see a father who's holding his dead child, it doesn't make my heart grieve any less that the father's Muslim. And so I hope that our love for our brothers and sisters in this family, the one thing about my work, Brad, that's been a great privilege is I've gotten to really understand how we're a human family, because I get to know communities in a very intimate way most people don't. My work in Iraq, I've gotten very close to the Yazidis. The Yazidis are seen as kind of the most separate religious and ethnic community on earth from other communities. And when you're with them drinking tea till 4 a.m, you're like, it's just like any other family, my Muslim families, my Jewish families, my Christian families. And so I'm really grateful for that. So what we shouldn't do is write a foreign government a blank check.
Yeah, hold them accountable.
Israel is a foreign state. But if I am concerned about Israel's security, then we have to ask ourselves, why did the United States and Israel fund Hamas? Why? Why did we fund Hezbollah? And what was this all about? Well, Benjamin Netanyahu said he was trying to control the flame. Well, how did that work out for you? How did that work out for you? Why do we have a system where the heads of Hamas are living in luxury, protected by the United States right now in Qatar? That seems strange to me. Billionaires eating steak and lobster on top of 5-star hotels with the protection of the United States and Qatar. That doesn't make much sense to me. So I think we as Christians need to transcend the geopolitical games that states play, not be pawns. But remember, we are priest, prophet, and king. And as a priest, what does that mean? We suffer for the community in the service of our Creator. That we offer sacrifice, which is us. We are the sacrifice we're offering between God and our community. What does it mean to be a prophet? It's to say truths no one wants to hear. I will never say something that's popular because it's being said by people who are more articulate and eloquent than me. The only thing I should say is what no one else is going to say. If someone else is saying it, I don't need to say it because they're going to say it better anyway. I'm a prophet, and you are too. We all are. And we're kings. What does that mean as kings? We are stewards of the good of our community. And I'm not going to allow myself to be instrumentalized by a state power. Never. Now, they do. They influence me and you because they're crafty. They've got power and money and influence, carrots and sticks. But that's just how I approach these things in 30 years of trying to advocate for Christians that are being persecuted.
Well, and you, like I said, you've done it in real time. It's not It's not some kind of bumper sticker, save this and protect that and whatever. You're really doing it. So you've seen things, and that's why I take it so seriously, because I'm trying to get to the truth. That's my purpose as a believer. What's true? Jesus said he's truth. All truth emanates from him. I need to be sacredly holding that flame of truth wherever that light needs to shine, including Israel. So, like I said, I just kind of superficially accepted that that's kind of what I'm supposed to do as a believer. And so I just realize that there's more to it. And I just am trying to figure it out. We got now suddenly Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson's doing these things. And we don't know, it's so impossible to even know.
But Brett, I want to say you're right? Like that impulse in the wake of the Shoah and persecution and the othering of Jews, that impulse to say, as a Christian, it is my responsibility to serve those who are outcasts, to kiss lepers and kneel next to women caught in the act of adultery. That is true. But it's also true that we are watching the fomenting of prejudice and bigotry and hatred against Arabs and Muslims to allow unjust, cruel, inhumane behavior. And we need
we are also seeing a lot of anti-Semitism rising up in the universities in the United States.
And that's why I'm saying I agreed with you that we should address that.
Yeah.
But I can do both.
Yeah.
But we live in a world where we're told you got to pick a team. And if you do, I always say my new pose is I'm just going to be sanctimonious. That's it. I accept it. Like, I'm not playing your games. I'm not going to be lured into tribal identification, because Jesus Christ came to say there's no longer Greek or Jew, Gentile or Jew, that we are a family. And we were sent out into the world to bring these lost sheep into the fold. And I'm not going to foment bigotry and prejudice against lost sheep. I'm going to go after them. I'm not going to bomb them. I'm not going to bomb their schools, their children, their hospitals.
I get you.
I'm not going to reduce world religions to a caricature. I'm going to recognize that there are communities with culture and religions that go back centuries. And if I want to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them, I have to know who they really are. I need not to reduce them to a cartoon character. And but I feel like the church has reduced the world into cliches and people's.
Well, if they're a cliche, it's easier to ignore. If they're a cartoon, then you don't have to take it seriously. The truth about Christianity and what makes it unique, because it's true, not just truth of our faith, but it is actually the truth from which all truth comes. It is the ultimate reality, because it's Christ the Messiah who dimensionalized himself as God. No other religion has that. But it also allows us, or demands of us, things that are so ridiculous. Love your enemy, pray for those that despitefully use you, that it doesn't make any sense unless the supernatural is expected of those of us who claim to be Christ followers. And that costs us everything, including oftentimes lives. Well, we don't want to give it up. We want to talk about martyrdom. We don't want to turn. We want to talk about sacrifice. We just don't want to be involved. We want to read about it. We certainly don't want to do it. And that's what a disciple is, as opposed to a Christian, which can be a title or a moniker, as opposed to suffering, which is what's expected to grow. Well, and when people buy your book, who are watching this show or listening, which is Dispatches from the Great Campaign, and I guess you said it's different articles compiled from things you've written over the years of your
from the 1990s until today, from Hollywood to war zones.
But what I want you to be able to do as we close it out, Jason, is I guess in some sense, if you can quickly summarize. So for Christians listening and watching, you go, you know what? I really do want to serve Christ. I do want to know how to defend Israel, but I certainly don't want to presume something, or maybe have just assumed something without making sure that I'm being morally balanced. Are they going to learn things from your book to help educate?
Oh yeah, no, most definitely. That's what the whole struggle has been, right? Like, when you're fighting abortion in the early 1990s, it's challenging. Today, it's quite easy.
Yeah.
We have a big, broad tribe. And when I was a Republican, as late as 2004 and 5, I worked for the RNC. They tried to fire me from the RNC in 2004 because they ordered me not to distribute the pro-life guides that we were set out, because the head of the local Republican Party said, don't send out the pro-life voter guides that the RNC sent. And I said, I'm distributing them whether you want me to or not. They actually capitulated. But I remember, like, when it was hard to be pro-life, even in the Republican Party, when I opposed the invasion of Iraq, in 2003. I was an infantry veteran at the time, saying this war is imprudent and it's going to undermine the interests of Christians in the region. People called me all sorts of names, right? So this book really is, when I was writing in the early 2000s for border security, to protect migrants from economic exploitation and to protect American wages and to protect our borders, I was called a bigot. Now people say I'm a squish on immigration because I say I want to protect migrants from exploitation. It's not just about Americans. It's about we have an economic system that's based on luring people into an underground economy that undermines American wages, makes our cities less safe, and makes really good, beautiful, baptized Christian people, most of them, trapped in a dangerous economy without legal protection. So, there was a time when I was called a reactionary bigot. Now I'm called a squish. So really the challenge to advocate human dignity in the midst of confusion and competing interests and power trying to distort arguments, you're going to see what it looks like over decades. So this all prepared me for Gaza, because this has been the most challenging. Because you and I have a lot of the same friends and a lot of people I really love. No, maybe pro-life because it was so intimate and I was young, but that really prepared me for this. And the hard part is that people I love, it's not my Christian Zionist friends, because I really dismiss people that don't have skin in the game. They've read one or two books by Jonathan Cahn and watched Pastor Hagee. I don't care. Well, what does bother me is my Jewish friends think that I don't have empathy for their situation, for their fears, for their security, for their families in Israel, which I do. But I hate, that's the part that bothers me. Other than that, my life of advocating for the vulnerable has become an exercise. And one of the things I teach my children is it is more important to love than to be loved. And oftentimes when you are loving, people resent you. You'll be perceived as, it's better to be loving than to be perceived as loving.
So for those Christians out there, let's let this be your sort of finale. For the Christians out there who are listening to you, intrigued, some of them are angry, some of them are frustrated, some of them are going, wait a minute, here we go, anti-Semite. Isn't the church have quite a history of that? Look at Luther. I mean, you know what, he was an anti-Semite at the, look, here we go.
Well, and he started out, and here's one of my concerns. He started out as a philo-Semite. One of the reasons he left the Catholic Church is he said it was anti-Semitic. And he said, I'll know how to convert the Jews. Watch me go do it. And then it didn't work. And he wrote a book called The Jews and Their Lies, written by Martin Luther. Something I have noticed is people go from Zionist to anti-Semitic. We don't want that.
No. And I guess what I wanted to give you this opportunity, because they will clip things from our little interviews and try to spin them so they can paint us as whatever they choose to do, is I guess if you could just kind of summarize for those who are intrigued by your book, want to get it, are going to buy it, want to read it, don't want to abandon their faith, and maybe they're supportive of Israel, or at least to try to show Jews that we don't hate them, because we don't have a great track record historically as Christians. But how would you kind of summarize, I guess, what you think a Christian who's truly seeking the Lord and trying to do this properly might be overlooking or missing about Israel, just so they can find the balance that maybe they haven't seen before, so that A, they can see you're not against Jews, but B, you just want to make sure that doesn't give anybody a blank check to go immorally destroy people and think that somehow they're doing the Lord's work. So how would you kind of just define
Well, I think if you care about the state of Israel, which, I mean, more importantly, you care about the people of Israel. The people of Israel are with us now. Millions of people marching on the streets calling for this war to end, saying, stop the atrocities in Gaza and go after the hostages. They feel that Netanyahu is using the hostages as an excuse to steal Gaza and ethnically cleanse Gaza. This is what Israelis feel. So I am more concerned about the interests of the people of Israel. The Palestinians are Palestinian citizens, of course, the Druze, the Jews, obviously, and the Palestinians. I care about them. We that if you really care about the interests of the Israeli people, that you will call for a ceasefire and end to this war. And why I'm not worried about the clip ups that people have here is they've already lost They have lost. The truth has escaped.
Mm.
And the floodgates are about to burst open. A year ago, it was tough, really tough to be in my shoes. Now it's tough to be in the other people's shoes. It's interesting to watch when I was being ratioed on social media 6 months ago, and now when people chirp at me, they get ratioed. It's very interesting to see how quickly people swing. And I'm wondering, are these the same people that were attacking me? Now they're attacking the people attacking me, and all in undignified ways. That we just have to stay on our toes. And I write about this in the article. I get swept away by emotion and anger, as we all do. Tribal identification, not wanting to be proven wrong, wanting to be right. But what's in the best interest of the people of the Holy Land, Palestinians, Israelis, Jews, Christians, Druze, Muslims, everyone else that's there, there's a lot of people there, is peace, and fairness, and justice, truth. And if you want to persuade me, if you think I'm off on a lot of things, you can't persuade me if you just come out and say anti-Semite, because then you don't know where I'm coming from.
Right.
When you work in sales, the first thing you need to want to know is what's causing your customers pain. You answer their problem. What's your problem? You know, Mr. Stein, tell me about your car. What don't you like about your car? Oh, I got the answer for you over here.
Yeah.
But if I go, well, you don't like about your car is that it's 2-wheel drive, and you're like, I live in Nebraska, brother. I don't need a 4-wheel drive. What are you talking about? I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. But if I just want to make it about, it's 2-wheel drive, I got this 4-wheel. It's not going to. I want to persuade people, as people would want to persuade me when we disagree. But I think the key is to know really, really, what are we disagreeing about? And then let's come to an understanding. And you might come to figure out I'm a bigot. I might come to figure out you're a bigot. And then there's nothing I can do with you but shake the dust off my feet, or you can just shake the dust off your feet and walk away from me, because I can't help you then, or you can't help me then. Yeah. But I assume most people are kind, are loving, want to be good. And then therefore, I think if we're open and honest, we're going to come to some sort of agreement. Or we can agree that we trust each other and we trust each other's motives, but our theologies. This is why I'm more forgiving on evangelicals who are writing the State of Israel blank check than Catholics. Because if you're Catholic and you are writing and I'm Catholic, writing the State of Israel blank check, it's not your theology. Because our church teaches that we are the new Israel, and that Jesus Christ is the third temple, and that Christians, baptized believers, are bricks in that temple. And that all of the promises of Abraham were fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And so my theology wouldn't allow for what evangelical theology demands. So one could be a Protestant Christian Zionist and not be a hateful bigot to Palestinians or Arabs. Just recognize this is God's will. It's a harsh truth, and it has to happen. But if one isn't Catholic, or if one is Catholic or atheist, and holds to this view, one has to assume you're just a bigot. Or you're just
is that in some ways synergistic with replacement theology?
Well, replacement theology is a new word to describe what all Christians believe from the first century until a small sect of fundamentalist evangelicals in the late 19th and early 20th century, through pastors funded by the Rothschild family. We're getting into some deep stuff. And with the promulgation of the Schofield Reference Bible, which to me is, again, it's a whole conversation, and I'm not a theologian, but I got a list of verses I can give you, people to look at, like Romans 9:6-8, Galatians, of course, 28 and 29, Galatians 4:25, 26, Matthew 3:9. I mean, scripture doesn't hold it up. That's why Schofield had to have so many reference notes.
Yeah.
Because the plain reading of especially Paul, or Jesus's parable of the field, I think it takes an extreme amount of mental gymnastics. And in one way, it seems to honor Jews. And this is why I think a lot of people go from Zionist to anti-Semitic. In one way, it does seem to honor Jews, but it really others Jews. It says Jews they're outside of the covenant of Jesus Christ, as if all other people groups belong to it but the Jews. But scripture says that Jesus came first for the Jews. So I think it is hard because I think people like you, my friend, and others really are so grateful to the Jewish people for the Savior.
Sure.
We're so grateful. And so we want them to be othered, but they're not. They're not. Jesus said no. Like, God gave the Messiah through the Jews to us because we're a human family.
Right.
And now through the church, we were sent out into the world, not back into Jerusalem.
Right.
The apostles didn't get the students of the apostles didn't get to work building the third temple. They got to work sharing Jesus Christ,
Amen.
getting stabbed by Vikings, chopped by Comanche, drowning, all the horrible things, setting on fire, throwing off buildings, everything they went through. They could have just went back to Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple. No. They went out into the world, into the nations, to people that did not. Could you imagine the shock and scandal of a Christian missionary that wandered into the Viking camp with their bizarre, vicious, and dark religion and cruel behavior? And yet they saw in our ancestors, I'm Scandinavian, the image of God. I would not have. I can't imagine if I was a civilized Christian from the Mediterranean that wandered up and met some Viking berserker. I don't think I would have seen the image of God in that animal.
Yeah.
My ancestor, but they did.
Right. No, that's
so we're a family.
That is true. That is true. And it is the great mystery of the believer. You do have to give your life away. You do have to sacrifice everything. He wasn't using a metaphor when he said you're crucified. He's serious. He says it's your turn to be Jesus. It's your turn. And until it's time to come home and be completed. Folks, I've told you this before. The discipline of becoming a disciple is why you exist if you're a Christ follower. And one of the things the Bible says is study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, like rightly dividing the word of truth. In other words, if you don't study, if you don't listen to these conversations like I'm having with Jason, a fellow brother and believer, and I would defend his integrity as a believer to anybody, anytime. And so he's trying to get to the truth too. And so you got to get his book, Dispatches from the Great Campaign, Defending Life on the Front Lines, because it's going to help you study. Yeah, you're going to have to do some work, guys. You don't get to just listen anymore and let somebody else tell you what it means to be a believer. You have to dig deep. You have to let the Spirit of God nurture and speak and talk. And maybe, just maybe, you might end up in a direction and an area you didn't think you were going to go. Well, as long as it's true, that's what they're waiting for. Hey, buddy, follow me. Let's get to the truth and pass that on. Jason's a truth teller, a brave man, a good brother, and somebody I'm proud to call a friend. Get his book. We're going to put it up right here. Is it on Amazon yet? Are you out there yet?
It's on Amazon. If you go to vppbook.com and you buy a book, you can support our aid to the Christians in Gaza.
Nice.
Book. Yeah.
Dispatches from the Great Campaign, folks. This is what Brad Sign Has Issues tries to do, is in a fun way or sometimes in a very serious way. Get to the truth so you as a believer can change the world, because people should look at us like freaks. Who are you people? Why do you treat us this way? What is going on? I don't understand. Or said, yeah, I know. See what it looks like to see Jesus? It's mysterious. It's weird. It's counterintuitive. And it's the only way home. Remember, folks, if they ever say you're politically incorrect, always say thank you for the compliment. You don't want to be politically correct. You want to be Christian discipleship, Christ follower correct, because that's the only truth that actually stands the test of time. And remember, my job, not only to bring on great guys like Jason Jones and his books to help you be educated, but it's also to do this. It's to put the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.